Shalom. Want to give all praises, glory, and honor be to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This your brothers from the hopeful elect coming at you with a late night post-Sabbath, in the Sabbath lesson, right? But through the Spirit, man, Most High willing, you're edified. We won't be on here too long, and I know I say that sometimes, and we end up staying long, but it's plan on being real brief. So tonight's lesson is titled, the greatest highlight of all time. At least that's what I thought I titled it, the greatest highlight of all time. But through the Spirit, man, we're gonna go into a couple of things, right? But if you can tell by the title, this is going to go into some, I guess you could say aspects of works, right? But without further ado, man, all praise, glory, honor to the Father God of our fathers, man, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? If you could, Brother Azrael, right? Could you share your screen and go to that YouTube video I asked you to pull? Right? Salat. So before you play it real quick, Salat, before you play it, I got to set the record, right? So what we're about to watch, and we're not watching the whole 9-minute video, right? But what we're about to watch is a highlight video that is regarded as one of the, I guess you could say, the best, the most electrifying highlight video of all time. The reason that I'm watching this one, or I chose this one to play, is because, again, this video is regarded as the best highlight video of all time. When it comes to hoop mixtapes, Tavon Austin has the best highlight video. When it comes to baseball highlights, football highlights, it doesn't matter. Across all sports, all spectrums, people regard this video as the highest. Now, let's play this real quick. Let's play parts of this.
It's kind of choppy.
Right. So you can pause it real quick. Now, what it said at the beginning was, there's only one Tavon Austin. That's who this player is, right? If you don't know about Tavon Austin, man, he went to Dunbar High School, I think out in Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. But he ended up going to West Virginia, right? He ended up going to West Virginia for college, and he was there with now Seahawks quarterback Geno Smith. He had a heck of a football career at the University of West Virginia, in so much that it led him to being a first-round draft pick. Now, the significance of this is because, again, when you scroll down, can we scroll down, look at the views real quick? This is a regular football player who played at, I guess you could say in the football world, mid-major school, but it has 24 million views. And this came out 11 years ago. Now, it's not too many highlight tapes that's touching them numbers, right? So the reason that we're going into this is not for foolish reasons, for me to give y'all a breakdown on Greek sports or a breakdown on Tavon Austin himself, but that's to go into how many people look at the work that you do, right? People love or are infatuated with highlights, right? As a player, a former player myself of sports, when I wanted to get recruited, I'm putting together a highlight video. The same thing about making it to the kingdom of heaven. When I'm making it to the kingdom, I'm hoping that the Lord can remember my highlights, right? Everything that I did good, everything that I could show to the world, for the world to see, that will have me regarded as, if not the best, one of the best players in the land, historically, figuratively, literally, spiritually, whatever you want to take it, right? Now, if we could just jump back to the Bible, and let's start at Psalms chapter 105, and let's start at verse number 1, right? Now, I want to go there because since we're talking about highlights, let's talk about somebody who has the highlights of highlights, right? The Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's read this.
The book of Psalms, chapter 105, and verse number 1. It says, "Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people."
Right. So we're going to give thanks unto the Lord, right? And we're going to make known his deeds. What are some of the deeds of the Lord, right? Let's read verse 2, and then we're going to jump down to verse number 6.
Verse 2. Sing unto him, sing songs unto him, talk ye of all his wonderful, wondrous works.
Right, let's
Verse
talk
number
of the Lord's wondrous works.
Verse number 6. O ye seed of Abraham, his servant, ye children of Jacob, his chosen.
Can you scroll down, brother? Brother Azrael, can you scroll down so we can see the Con? It says, "Oh ye see." Go ahead, verse 6. Start at verse 6 or verse
Oh,
7. Excuse me.
Verse 7. He is the Lord our God; his judgments are in all the earth.
Right. Let's keep reading.
He hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Isaac, and confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying, Unto thee will I give the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. When they were but a few men, when they were were but a few men in number, yea, very few, and strangers in it.
Salakia. So before you keep reading, this is going into all the works of the Lord, all the things that the Lord did on the children of Israel's behalf, right? This is starting at the beginning when he commanded a covenant through Abraham and gave it to a commandment for Jacob in a law for the children of Israel for an inheritance, right? This whole chapter is talking about what the Lord did on behalf of Israel, right? Let's keep reading.
Verse 13, when they went from one nation to another, from one kingdom to another people, he suffered no man to do them wrong. Yea, he reproved kings for their sakes, saying, Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm.
No harm. Now, Salakia. Now, you may say, well, what correlation does this have to Tavon Austin only one highlights, right? Well, let's remember what it said at the beginning of the chapter, right? Hey, we're going to talk of the Lord's wondrous works. The same way we showed the views that 24 million people seen this highlight tape that was put together by the editor on YouTube of Tavon Austin. The same way millions and millions and millions, an innumerable multitude of people have seen the works of the Lord, right? And that's what all is being named right here in this very book, this very chapter, right? And these specific verses that we're reading. The Lord is spewing about his highlights, right? We are giving an example, right? I don't know how to make the not correlation. It's a word that I'm looking for, but I can't think about right now. It'll come back to me. But basically, we're reading about what the Lord did as if they were highlights put together on a screen, you know? If somebody were to take a video of all the works of the Lord written in this chapter and all the various works that are mentioned all throughout the books, we could put together a highlight tape the same way people put together highlight tapes in our lives for us when we want to look good to the people, you know, and when we want to get recruited and when we want to have memories of how good we were or how great we were or how great we are, right? We have highlight tapes. The same way the Lord records certain things in the scriptures for a certain reason, so that way he can be glorified. This is basically a quick breakdown of the Lord's highlight tapes, right? Let's keep reading. If you can scroll down real quick. Let's start at verse number keep scrolling down. Start at verse 23. Let's start at verse 23.
Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham, and he increased his people greatly and made them stronger than their enemies. He turned their heart to hate his people, to deal subtly with his servants. He sent Moses his servant and Aaron whom he had chosen. They showed his signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham. He sent darkness and made it dark, and they rebelled not against his word. He turned their waters into blood and slew their fish. Their land brought forth frogs in abundance in the chambers of their scroll.
Hey, and look, this is important because Again, this is all going into the Lord's highlight tape, right? This is going into everything that the Lord did on behalf of the children of Israel. He's mentioning all these great things that happen, the same way we see all these great things that happen in games. Or if you didn't catch the game, you go back and watch what? The highlights of the game. You go back and see what happened during the game, right? So this is basically us getting a view of the Lord's, again, highlight tape, right? Let's go to let's go back to the YouTube real quick, right? Let's go back to YouTube real quick. Now, I want to, can you do a favor? Search in the YouTube bar, what's his name? Who I told you we was gonna look up. Austin Rivers, Winter Park Hoop Mixtape, right? Austin Rivers, Winter Park Hoop Mixtape. Why am I pulling these highlight tapes up? Because again, these are highlight tapes that played a pivotal role in the lives of those two men, right? And I'm not going to say the highlight tape itself was the reason why they got drafted to the NBA and drafted to the NFL and had, you know, respectable careers. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that these two highlight tapes allowed these men to be revered as great men in the eyes of the people. Everybody in their mama, you know, that's the saying, the slang term. Everybody kind of wanted to be like these two dudes. The brothers on the screen are the ones who put me on Austin Rivers Winter Park highlight tape, his hoop mixtape, because I didn't know. Well, I ain't gonna say I didn't know, but I was just unfamiliar with how pivotal his highlight tape was to young basketball players, you know, at that time. And a lot of people wanted, you know, were inspired by what they seen from Austin Rivers just based on this clip. If you've never seen him play in person, the only thing you could go off of is what was on social media at the time. And at the time, social media wasn't as huge as it is now, but he still was so great that a lot of people was able to see him play worldwide that never seen this man play in person. This is his highlight tape. This is something that makes him look good. Let's play part of this, right? Mind you, this is his senior highlight tape, high school. I know it's kind of choppy. Now pause it real quick. What he just said was, I'm gonna go off right now. You know what I'm saying? And then start going off. I remember when these brothers on the screen told me about this, man. We was in the gym leaving Crunch Fitness after we had just got done working out. And we was talking about football and basketball and stuff. And then we was talking about this hoop mixtape. Now, it's important because, again, not the passion that the brothers had when they was explaining this to me, but it's just the fact that because at the time this hoop mixtape was so great, it's almost like it takes you back to, you know, your childhood or that moment in time where you were at in your life when this tape was, I guess you could say, released, right? When it first was made known unto you. You think about the things that you were doing. You think about where you were, you think about where you were going, or you think about, you know what I'm saying, what you wanted to be after seeing this. The same thing in life when we look at the works of the Lord, right? Oftentimes, the reason that the setting is so important when the Lord recalls the things that he did, because we got to remember where we come from. Like we talked about on Feast of Tabernacles, right? Keep the tabs open was the first lesson that I did, that the brothers had did to kick off Tabernacles, right? We do these things, these feast days, these holy days and stuff like that to commemorate or remember, you know, the things that the Lord did for our behalf. We keep the Feast of Tabernacles because the Lord said we need to remember that he made the children of Israel to dwell in booths in the wilderness. The same reason we keep the Passover to remember when the Lord brought us out from the hands of the Egyptians, right? It's the same thing that when we watch highlight tapes, man, it takes us back to a moment in time of our life where if it's our highlight tape, it takes us back to the moment where we were athletes and we were in tip-top shape, or, you know, we were trying to get recruited, You know, it takes us back to being young again. Or if we're watching someone else's highlight tape that we looked up to, it takes us back to a moment in our lives where, you know, we seen this and we were like, dang, this is motivation for me to be better, X, Y, and Z. The same thing that the works of the Lord that we're watching, that we're reading about in Psalms 105, it's the same things that everything that it mentions that the Lord did for the children of Israel, it should kind of make you have that same sort of gratitude, that same sort of appreciation, that same sort of gratefulness. And it should even make you ambitious to want to keep the commandments in spirit and in truth more and more. So that way, you know, you can get to the kingdom. So that way you could be a part of when the Lord sets to gather his people together again, and he makes another highlight for himself, you could be a part of that number that's gathered in, right? Let's go back to the Bible real quick, and let's go to the book of um, Nehemiah chapter 9, right? And let's start at verse number 20.
Nehemiah chapter 9 and verse number 20. Thou gavest also thy good spirit to instruct them, and withheld not thy manna from their mouth, and gaveth them water for their thirst.
Just keep
Yea,
reading.
40 years didst thou sustain them in the wilderness, so that they lacked nothing. Their clothes waxed not old, and their feet swelled not. Moreover, thou gavest them kingdoms and nations, and didst divide them into corners, so they possessed the land of Sion, and the land of the king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, king of Bashan. Their children also multipliedeth thou as the stars of heaven, and broughtest them into the land, concerning which thou hadst promised of their fathers, that they should go in to possess it. So the children went in and possessed the land, and now subdued before them the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, and gave them into their hands with their kings and the people of the land, that they might do with them as they would.
Khan. Salakia, you can stop right there. So, and we're going to read more in this same chapter, but the point I'm emphasizing again is, what are we looking at, right? Let's not get caught up in, oh, the brother's reading on and on and on. What is he reading? What is it talking about, right? What's the setting? What's the theme? What's the overall gist of the passage? It's talking about, again, the wondrous works of the Lord. Again, these are more highlights that the Lord has all throughout the scriptures. We're in a different place that we can see the greatness of the Lord in its what's they call, what's that word for it? I need to start reading the dictionary a little bit more again, right? But pretty much we're just seeing the works of the Lord, you know what I'm saying, being recalled by Nehemiah, right? Again, the greatest highlight tape of all time. It doesn't belong to Tavon Austin. It doesn't belong to Austin Rivers. It doesn't belong to Julio Jones, Tom Brady. It doesn't belong to Barry Sanders. It belongs to the Lord. Because over and over again, we can see the sacrifices he made for a certain people, right? Why am I saying that? Let's keep reading. Let's start at verse 25.
Verse 25, and they took strong cities and a fat land, and possessed houses full of all goods, um, wells digged, vineyards and olive yards, and fruit trees in abundance. So they did eat and were filled, and became fat, and delighted themselves in thy great goodness.
Right, let's keep reading.
Nevertheless, they were disobedient and rebelled against thee, and cast thy law behind their backs, and slew which testified against them to turn them to thee, and they wrought great provocations. Therefore, thou deliverest them into the hand of their enemies, who vexed them, and in the time of their trouble, when they cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and according to thy manifold mercies, thou gavest them saviors, who saved them out of the hand of their enemies.
Right. So the Lord sent us many saviors out of the hands of our enemies, even though we were the reason he sent us into our enemies' hands in the first place. Right. That's another highlight, because when you go read about how the Lord took us from these lands, it's something to marvel over. Right. It's something to fathom. Right. It's something to, really just be in awe at. Right. To be, I guess you could say, dismayed at. right? Let's read verse 28.
Come on. Verse 28. But after they had rest, they did evil again. And before thee, therefore leftest thou them in the hand of their enemies, so that they had the dominion over them. Yet when they returned and cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and many times didst thou deliver them according to thy mercies.
Right. You can stop right there. So this is showing the highlights of how the Lord did X, Y, and Z on our behalf. And then when we did wrong against him, he sent us into captivity, right? And then he delivered us out of captivity. But see, then we got comfortable. Oh, the Lord freed us from captivity. Shoot, I can kick my feet up and chill, right? And then he sent us into captivity again because we started transgressing his commandments. Then, because he had so much mercy for us, he delivered us out of captivities again, right? Again, this is a highlight tape of the Lord. I'm showing you how I did something over and over and over again. The same way when we put together highlight tapes for sports, when we want to get recruited, or even a resume, right? A professional resume is nothing but a professional highlight tape, right? A resume is nothing more than a professional highlight tape. They ask for your job history. You're going to talk about your accolades, your achievements. You're going to talk about your skills. You're going to talk about what you bring to the table. Even in interviews, you're selling yourself. You're talking about your career highlights as a professional, right? Everything is centered around highlights. You don't want lowlights being, what's shown on your screen. You want highlights. You want the moments where you felt like you were at your best to be displayed, right? And that's why we're going over this, because again, the Lord's highlight tape is impeccable, unmatched, right? Let's go to the book of Sirach, chapter 44, real quick. We're not going to read all the chapters that spin off of 44, but let's go to Sirach 44 real quick. Again, why is it important? What is the significance of saying the Lord's highlight tape is unmatched? We already know that, brother. Well, sometimes people first time hearing it. So sometimes you just want to be able to give people something to think about. A lot of our people like sports. I like to keep people kind of engaged sometimes when we do lessons. So why not, collaborate the two? Not saying that sports is equal to the word of the Lord, and not saying that the word of the Lord, not saying that the Lord actually cares about sports at all. I believe he doesn't. But the reason that I'm saying this is because I'm taking one side of the world and another side of the world and putting the two together to give people who like highlights, who like sports, something to think about in regards to the Lord. Now let's read this in Sirach 44. Let's start at verse number 1. If you could scroll down a little bit, Brother Azrael. All right, we can start at verse 1. Yeah.
Book of Sirach, chapter 44, and verse 1. Let us now praise famous men and our fathers that begat us. The Lord has wrought great glory by them through his great power from the beginning, such as did bear rule in their kingdoms, men renowned from their power, giving counsel by their understanding and declaring prophecies, leaders of the people by their counsels and learning meet for the people, wise and eloquent in their instructions.
Con. Now let's jump down to verse number 17, right? Because again, matter of fact, let's start at 16. Because again, we're talking about famous men. Now, in this chapter, is going to name famous men who bear rule in their kingdoms, right? Who the Lord had great glory upon. Let's look at some of these men's highlights, right?
Verse 16, Enoch pleased the Lord and was translated being an example of repentance to all generations.
Right. So Enoch, he pleased the Lord and he was an example of repentance, right? Sometimes when coaches play highlights, like when I played football at the university that I went to, one thing that my coach would do, my D-line coach, my freshman year, one thing that he would do is he would play professional highlight tapes of players in the NFL. And what he would say is, see how he did X, Y, and Z? He serves as an example of how to do X, Y, and Z. So the same way we have men that embody certain positions on the football field or on the basketball court or on the baseball diamond, whatever you want to call it, the same way we have men in the scriptures who serve as an example of how to live life and do X, Y, and Z throughout life, right? Let's keep reading. Verse 17.
Con. Noah was found perfect and righteous in the time of wrath. He was taken in exchange for the world. Therefore was he left as a remnant unto the earth when the flood came. An everlasting covenant was made with him that all flesh should perish no more by the flood.
Right. That's why we have a rainbow in the sky. Again, a covenant that was established right then and there, and it's been in the sky every time it rained ever since. Well, for the most part, it's been in the sky every time it rained, right? But you can still find a rainbow in the sky to this day. But again, Noah, perfect, righteous. That's why the Lord left him for a remnant, right? Now let's read verse 19 about Abraham.
Verse 19, Abraham was a great father of many people, and glory was there none like unto him, who kept the law of the Most High and was in the covenant with him. He established the covenant in his flesh, and when he was proud,
Proved.
proved, he was found faithful.
So real quick, now we talk about Abraham. It's the same thing in Hebrews chapter 11 when it talks about how Abraham, right, how he found faith, right? I mean, not how he found faith, but why he was considered faithful, or how he showed and exemplified faith. Because see, when the Lord tested him about giving him his firstborn, right, and the Lord told him, "Hey, you need to well, not his firstborn, but his son Isaac." When the Lord told him, "You need to sacrifice Isaac," he went ahead and was going to do it. He didn't understand the assignment, but he understood that he trusted the Lord. So he had faith that the Lord was telling him to do this for a good reason. And that's why books like Romans 4 and 5, I think, where it talks about Abraham was justified by his faith and not by works, is because Abraham believed the Lord before the work was even done. Before the work was executed, Abraham showed that he had faith in the Lord. He was being obedient to the Lord. So Abraham serves as an example for having perfect faith, right? Let's jump real quick to Hebrews chapter 11, right? Because again, we're talking about famous men right now. That's what Sirach 44 mentions, famous men. And it goes on to list their highlights. Why were these men considered famous in the eyes of the Lord? Why are people considered famous in the eyes of men? Because of their highlights, right? When you compare rappers, when you compare artists, when you compare athletes, one thing people are going to look to is statistics. And then they're going to look at statistics, and then they're going to look at the film, right? They're going to look at the big eye in the sky, the film. And they're going to say, well, so-and-so never did X, Y, and Z. The one reason people consider Michael Jackson the greatest artist to ever live on this earth is because when he performed at the Super Bowl, when he stepped on the stage, he had not said a word, he had not played a beat. But one thing that you see in the crowd was the reaction. People were passing out. People were acting like they just seen the Most High God with their own two eyes. That was a highlight. You've seen that on film. That's something that could be commemorated. That's remembered by a lot of people, right? It's the same way when we read the Bible sometimes, we often overlook the highlights that certain men have in the scriptures. We often overlook the highlights that the Lord has because we watch the highlight tapes of other people. But how often do we remember the highlight tape of the Lord, right? Are we there in Hebrews 11?
This is Hebrews 4.
Con. Let's go to Hebrews 11. We're not going to read the whole thing, right? But let's read here. Let's start at verse 1.
Hebrews 11 and verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear.
Well, can we jump down to verse 6?
Con. Verse number 6. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
Now let's jump down to verse 8.
Con. Verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourns in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise.
Now, again, we're not going to read the whole entire chapter, but again, Abraham being the example of faith, right? Abraham being the example that we have behind in faith, right? The same way you see highlights like Tavon Austin's highlight tape, and people say this is an example of how any versatile player should be, right? The same way you watch Austin Rivers in his Winter Park high school highlights, right? His senior year highlights, and you say this is an example of what an NBA caliber player looks like in high school. It's the same way when you read stuff about Abraham, Hezekiah, who else? Enoch, Noah. It's the same type of example, right? It's just in a different way. It's in actually the right way it should be. We should be looking at righteous examples of how to live our lives, righteous examples of how to repent, righteous examples of how to, give back to the poor. We should be looking at righteous examples of all these things instead of being too consumed with the highlight tapes that surround around sports. I'm not saying it's wrong for you to look at those things. I'm just saying that these things matter most. And I get that. A lot of people get it. That's why when we get on here and do lessons, we're not doing lessons for the people who already understand. We're doing it for the ones who don't. Again, the word was made for the sick, not the healthy. So if you've already heard this before, or you already understand this concept, then make sure you share it with those who don't. Make sure you help those who don't understand it. Because at the end of the day, again, we're talking about the Lord's highlights, the greatest highlight tape of all time. Why does it all go back to the Lord? Because the Lord is the one who raised these men up. The Lord is the one who did things for these men on behalf of these men that helped establish these men. And the Lord is the one who was pleased by the lives of these men. That's why they were left for an example of certain things, right? Let's go look at other places. Let's go to Philippians chapter 3, right? Philippians chapter 3. Because there's another brother who talks about his highlights, right? Who talks about what he did, who talks about how great I am, right? Let's start at verse 1. We're gonna read through 6.
You said 6.
Yeah. Brother Azrael, can you make the text size smaller at the top, right next to Bible options? If you can just click the minus on text size. I don't know if it'll go down some, so that way you don't got to scroll. If not, I mean, that's cool. If not, then you can just scroll.
Philippians 3 and verse 1. Finally, my brethren.
Hold on.
Finally, my brethren, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things to you, to me indeed is not grievous, but for you it is safe. Beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the concision. For we are the circumcision which worship God in the Spirit, and rejoice in Christ Jesus, and have no confidence in the flesh. Though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more.
So basically, all Paul's saying right there, if a man think that his works are greater than, if a man think that he can trust in his works, right, very greatly, well then I could trust in my works even more than that man. And then he goes on the name. Let's read.
Circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, and as touching the law, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless.
So touching the righteousness in the law, he was blameless. He was without sin, right? He was without blame. Same thing, he said, persecuting the church, he was a Pharisee. He said concerning zeal, he was persecuting the church. But as pertaining to the law, or as touching the law, he was a Pharisee. He was well studied and well understood in the law. He was a doctor of the law. That's why he said in Romans 7:1, for I speak to them that know the law. That's why people have a hard time understanding Paul, because Paul knows what he's talking about because he's well studied in it. This is a highlight, right? This is him this is him going into my works. This is him showing his highlights in life. He was circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, right? And then we just talked about the other things that he did. This is what I mean by when I say it's important to pay attention to the highlights in the scriptures, right? Not necessarily just the ones that we see on YouTube of great players, but let's look at the great men. That's why we went to Sirach 44, and it goes on into 45 and I think 46 as well, right? It talks about Hezekiah, and it talks about other various kings and men outside of Abraham, Noah, and Enoch, right? But again, the greatest highlight tape of all time resides within the scriptures, right? This is why verses like this are important. Let's get the book of Revelation chapter 22 and verse number 12. This is why verses like this are important. Let's read this.
Revelation 22 and 12. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be.
So when Christ returns, this is what's going to happen, man. Men are going to be given what their works were, right? The reason that you seen Tavon Austin get the Hornung Award, right, which is rewarded to the college football's most versatile player, right? The reason that you've seen him get that is because of the work that he did on and off the field, right? In and out of games, at practice, at lifts, at study halls. Whatever it took, he was set out to be great. The same thing with Austin Rivers. The reason that he was so good at Winter Park, it could be genetics, but at the same time, he had to put in work. He had to put in work to get to the NBA, He had to put in work to have a long career in the NBA, right? The same thing when it comes to us trying to get into the kingdom, we got to put in work, If we want to talk about our highlights, think about how you live your life every day. And if you live your life every day and you don't think at no time that you think that you have a highlight, then you're doing something wrong. We got to start building up highlights that the Lord can use for examples of other men that's roaming the earth right now. Our lives should be every day a living highlight. Just because you don't play football or basketball or volleyball or baseball or softball or tennis or run track anymore does not mean you still can't have highlights. Does not mean that the Lord still can't use things and acts that you did and put them on a film display and show it to the whole world, right? We got to remember our lives, like the brother read a precept to close out camp today, which is Romans 12 and 1. And we should present our bodies by the mercies of God, that we should present our bodies as a living sacrifice. Every day you got to sacrifice your body to make a highlight. So that way we could lead some people back to the Father, right? Back to the law, statutes, and commandments, right? And if everybody, even after you perish, right, most high forbid, but if folks are to go and leave this earth, what type of highlight tape will you have? What type of name will you have amongst your peers, right? What type of reverence will men give you? What type of praise will you receive? These are things we need to think about on a daily basis, right? But with that, that's my last precept, man. The greatest highlight tape of all time, it belongs to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it's found all throughout the scriptures. But there are various men in the Bible who the Lord used that have highlight tapes greater than the two that we seen on the screen at the beginning of the lesson, right? So just food for thought, man. Most High willing, you all were edified. The brothers have anything they want to add?
Man, I think that was a great video, man. And I think, it's important to understand that we got resumes that we got to be building up, man. We got highlight tapes that we got to build up ourselves, right? We're made in the Most High's image. So everything that he's laid out and that he's because he doesn't have to prove himself, you know what I'm saying? But over and over again, he gives us the mercy and he lays it out for us that he does, prove himself to us. And, we still spit in his face. But I just think that's special because he doesn't have to prove himself, yet he still does. But you got a lot of mortal men that feel like they don't got to prove themselves. And we, in fact, do. So I think this lesson was definitely right on time. But
Man, since you said that, Gideon made the Lord prove himself plenty of times, and the Lord didn't have no problem proving to Gideon, and that's something, to check the pride of man, right? I also want to say, I was watching a little lesson or a sermon clip earlier today, and the man that was preaching said, he said, if you have to, wait, no, he said, if you can explain perfectly why you're successful, that means God didn't make you successful. You made yourself successful. And that's a problem because you didn't have God in the center of your process, right? And I say that to say, uh, God ain't the only one with the highlight tape, but he is. This is what I mean by that. When you look at stories like Elijah got a mean highlight tape in the Bible. Daniel got a mean highlight tape in the Bible. David got a mean highlight tape in the Bible, but it all goes back to God. Their highlight tape would be nothing if it had not been for the Lord on their side. I don't want to sound cliche, but it would have been nothing. So by default, their highlight tape is the Lord's highlight tape. So just like the brother Isaiah been saying, by default, the Lord's going to have the greatest highlight tape of all. And just like brother Daniel was saying, we all got to work on our highlight tape for the Lord as well, right? What's the book of Daniel going to say? Well, I mean, we know what the book of Daniel going to say. We know what the book of Isaiah going to say. But what's the book of Azrael going to say, right? Or whoever you are out there that may be watching this, right? What's the book going to say, right? Is your highlight tape going to glorify God? You know what I'm saying? So, we got to keep adding to the Lord's highlight tape, man, and play our role. But with that, I yield. Good lesson.
Yeah, Khan. Like the brother say, people say it like this. People say, if you could have a book in the Bible, what would it say? And that's how you gotta approach life every day. Like you're adding or taking away from your book. So whatever you do, just be cognizant of that. You know what I'm saying? But again, the highlight tapes ain't for me to sit up here and again rave about Tavon Austin and Austin Rivers. But if y'all want to go watch those, y'all can. But let those highlight tapes that you see of these Greek sports inspire you to put on these laws, statutes, and commandments each and every day like they're a uniform, and let's rock out and wear them. You know what I'm saying? And let's perform well. Let's have honest conversation. Let's lead people. Let's be servants in spirit and in truth, right? But Shabbat Shalom will close post Sabbath lesson. You know what I'm saying? But all praise to the Most High. All glory and honor be to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Man, it's your brothers from the hopeful elect signing out for the week, and we say Shalom.
Shalom.